Well, if you have your Bibles with you tonight, open them up to Hebrews. And we're going to actually begin at the end of chapter 10. Most of tonight's going to be spent in chapter 12. This week I heard about a book that was written in the 1600s. And the name of the book is The Rest, R-E-S-T, of the Saints. And Richard Baxter, powerful. And I took it and I ran it through ChatGPT, and then I republished it. And what was so amazing about this book, and actually I was going to take some of it tonight and quote it, but I'm not going to. But I already republished it. But this man was using the reality of the fact that Jesus said, where there in Hebrews chapter 12, when he talked about consider Jesus, and it says, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross. And this gentleman began to describe heaven in ways that I have never heard before, because when the Lord took me to heaven, and for me to describe what heaven was like was just beyond my human ability. It's like what it says there in 1 Peter, it says joy unspeakable and full of glory. I'm going to talk about that this coming Sunday, joy unspeakable. What do you mean unspeakable? Joy that is beyond expression, joy that is beyond explanation, joy that is beyond human understanding. And that's what heaven is like. Heaven is so amazing and wonderful, our oneness with God, our unity with God, our harmony with God. And the way he described it, and it's about a 200-page book, and throughout the book, he just keeps giving revelation after revelation after revelation of heaven. But he's not talking about the buildings. He's not talking about the streets of gold. He's not talking about the river of life. He's talking about our relationship with God. And it was just so mind-boggling. So you can literally, you don't have to get the book I did, because I just modernized it and simplified it. You can actually look it up. It's basically Richard Baxter, The Rest of the Saints, and you can read it in its original form as a PDF. But I mean, it was just mind-boggling. And it just got me to thinking about the reality of Christ. And by the time I got done reading what he had written, I could really say what Paul said, to be absent from the bodies, to be present with the Lord. He said, I have a desire to depart and be with Christ. But what I'm going to look at tonight is the joy that Jesus had in front of him, because remember, he talked about the glory he had with the Father before he became a man. And he said, I want that I want those who are following me to experience that glory and that joy. And I'm telling you what, the way he described heaven, it was like almost like if you were in a pit and somebody dropped you a lifeline, and you had to get out of the pit because it was being filled with some kind of acidic substance that would kill you. And you know, that rope would pull you up out of that pit. And I'm telling you what, if we really understood God's eternal plan and God's eternal motive for those who have chosen him, I believe it has the capacity to pull us out of sin, pull us out of fear, and pull us out of anxiety, and pull us out of the cares of this world. Not that we are ready to get out of this world, because that's what Paul said. Paul said, I want to depart, but it's more needful for you that I remain. But just the fact of what God has for us. And that's why the Bible says, eyes have not seen, ears have not heard, neither entered in the heart of man those things which God has prepared for them that love him. And to think that we're really only one heartbeat away from eternity. We're just, you know, how long can a person live without breathing? Not very long, I don't think. We're not that far away from eternity. But I want you to see what it says here in Hebrews chapter 10. And we realize there was no chapters. When this letter was written, now I believe it was Paul that wrote it, because he talks about Timothy. But when he wrote this, and every epistle is amazing, wonderful, awesome, magnificent, full of divine revelation, inspired by God. But Hebrews, he really, really covers a lot of ground in these chapters. And then he says this in chapter 10, verse 34, for ye had compassion on me in my bonds, and took joyfully the spoiling of your goods, knowing in yourself that ye have in heaven a better and enduring substance. So I just kind of want to connect the thoughts that Paul had, because there was no chapters. So before we get to chapter 12, notice what he says in this particular set of scriptures. For you had compassion on me in my bonds, and took joyfully. You took joyfully. How many of you know what the joy of the Lord is? It's unexplainable. It doesn't come up out of your flesh. It comes up out of your innermost being. It's like rivers of living water. The joy of the Lord, it says, is our strength. And the kingdom of God is what? Righteousness, peace, and joy in the Holy Ghost. It's supernatural. It's beyond understanding. And if you think about, because I want to talk about this Sunday morning, Sunday night, you think about this world, a lot of their life is based upon trying to find what God's already given us. They're trying to find peace. They're trying to find joy. They're trying to find happiness. They're trying to find fulfillment. Well, we have all of those things in Jesus. Do you know that tonight? We have all that we need in Jesus. It's all found in Jesus. And that's why it says, looking unto the author and finisher of our faith, consider Jesus. It's all in Jesus. But Paul, by the Spirit of God, says, for you have compassion on me and my bonds, and took joyfully the spoiling of your goods. I mean, you didn't lose your joy when you began to lose, he's talking about material things in this world. And I think it implies that they sold what they had to help Paul, and they sent him contributions to sustain him. And you can find that throughout other scriptures, like in the book of Philippians. And let's go on here. Knowing in yourself, listen, that you have where? In heaven, and this is Hebrews chapter 10, verse 34, a better and an enduring substance. You know, Jesus talked about the fact that we should store up our treasures in heaven, where rust and moth cannot corrupt and thieves cannot break through nor steal. And then he says this in the next verse, cast not away therefore your confidence, which have great recompense of reward. We're dealing with the subject of heaven here. There are rewards in heaven. Jesus gives us parables of the man who got 1 pound, 2 pounds, 3 pounds. Another one where there was 5 pounds. And they stood before the Lord, and he said this, and there is no exaggeration in the Bible. He says, because you were faithful over 5 pounds, I will put you over 5 cities. See, God created the human race. He knew the battle we were going to go through. He knew the struggles we were going to go through. He knew the hardships we were going to go through. And yet the Bible says the suffering of this present time is not worthy to be compared with the glory that shall be revealed in us, those who love Christ. So the glory that God has for us in eternity is so splendid and amazing and awesome and mind-boggling that what we've gone through in this world isn't even worth talking about. Of course, we don't know that because we're on this side of suffering. We're on this side of afflictions. We're on this side of tribulations. You say, well, Pastor Mike, I don't believe in tribulations. I don't know what world you live in. Paul said we must through much tribulation enter in the kingdom of heaven. It's not that we're confessing it or believing for it or declaring it. It's just truth. All that live righteously will be persecuted. That persecution is beyond the fact that people turning against us. We are wrestling not wrestling flesh and blood, but demonic powers. And that's why Peter said, don't be surprised at the fiery trial which is about to try you. Now, I'm not going to really get very far tonight, but I just want to encourage you that what we are going through in this life, it's going to be worth it all. And when I read that book from Richard Baxter, I think for the very first time, I really became jealous of those who are there right now. I mean, that's how that book impacted me. I mean, it made me jealous of them. And it's like, because how many of us are really jealous of those that we know who died in the Lord? And actually, it's the opposite, isn't it? It's like we want them to still be with us. My mom, my sister, my sister-in-laws, friends, associates. But you know what? Reading this book, and I'm going to encourage people to read it, especially if you have a loved one that knew God and went home to be with Jesus. I tell you what, I'm telling you, and just reading the first 2 or 3 chapters of this book, it's like, whoa, I want to be there. Oh, I want to be there where there's such oneness in God. And there's no more thought. Listen, it just becomes you. There's no more thought of faith or holiness or obedience or righteousness or touch not, taste not, handle not, or do this or do that. You become so one with God like a fish in the ocean. It just, it's just natural. It's just oneness with God. It's just who you are throughout eternity. It's just, for you have need of patience. Now listen, that means we're going to have to endure, because really that's what we're going to deal here with tonight. You have need of patience, that after you have done the will of God, you might receive the promise. Now let's talk about the promise. We're not talking about the promise of healing or deliverance or financial provision or answered prayer. That's really not the context here. I'm not saying you couldn't use it for that, because there's a lot of scriptures that you can use in other areas. And we know we need to have patience. Through faith and patience, inherit the promises. But this context is heaven. He's talking to people about heaven. And much of Hebrews, he talks about the Holy of Holies and how Jesus, as the high priest, ascended and put his blood in the Holy of Holies. And Wayne, you talked about that Sunday morning, son. So look what it says here. You have need of patience or endurance, longevity, that after you have done the will of God, that means you're living your life for him, you might receive the promise. Notice, not promises, eternity with God, oneness with God. Now notice, he said in order to experience this oneness with God, you got to endure. Remember, that's what it says in Matthew 24 and 25. He that endureth to the end will be saved. For yet a little while, listen, and he that shall come, so the context, will come, and he will not tarry. It's talking about Jesus. He's coming. Like a thief in the night, he will come. So we're going beyond the fact that when we die, our soul and our spirit ascends to heaven. Now he's talking about the total restoration. We're talking about our glorified bodies. When we see him, we'll be like him, and we'll be changed a moment in twinkling an eye. This corruption will put on incorruption, and this mortality will put on immortality. So the day will come when all of those who have gone on before us right now, they are a soul and a spirit, but they don't have a physical body. Now, don't misunderstand me. The spiritual world is tangible, it's touchable, it's tasteable, it's smellable, it's seeable. I've been there. Paul said, whether in the body, out of the body, I don't know. But we are going to have a physical body in the next life, a glorious body. If you had never seen a redwood tree in your life, let's say you've never even seen a tree, and I brought in a cone, because they're like pine cones off a redwood tree. How many have ever been out there and seen the redwood trees? It'll blow your mind. When I was out there 21 years old, I drove my motorcycle out to the West Coast, and I went through the forest where all these trees are that are up to 200-300 feet. They had one tree that we could drive through, and I heard it's no longer there. They had literally put a road through it, and that tree was 40 feet wide. Now, 40 feet wide is almost from here to that wall, 40 feet by over 200 feet tall. But if I would have just showed you that pine cone, and I said, Can you imagine what kind of plant this pine cone or this seed would produce? And if you had never seen a tree, you could not conceive it. I'm telling you, we cannot really perceive what we are going to be like in the next life. There is no words to describe it. I mean, if you took in our modern society where they've got all these so-called quote-unquote superheroes, they don't even come close to a glorified saint. They don't even get close to it. So then, for yet a little while, and he that shall come will come, and he will not tarry. Now the just, so here's the key, now the just shall live by faith. And this is our great struggle, is what we call the subject of faith. One of my number one selling books on Amazon is Overcoming the Spirit of Unbelief and Doubt by Smith Wigglesworth. I mean, it's number one for about 6 months in its category on Amazon, because that is what we're fighting, and we're going to see that tonight. Really what we all have to fight in our life is doubt and unbelief. And we all have doubt and unbelief. I don't care how spiritual you are, because there's different levels of doubt and unbelief. And for someone to say they're sinless reveals how spiritually blind they really are. Because anything that is not of faith is sin. Anything. It's not a sin that damns your soul, but what does sin do? Sin separates us from God. So doubt and unbelief separates me from the promise that God gave to me. Now, I might be operating in faith for finances, but not be operating in faith for maybe gentleness. See, all that God has, his character, his nature, his personality, his promises, his provisions, his covenant, it's all apprehended by faith in him. That means trust. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart. Lean not unto thy own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him. He shall direct thy paths. Now, I've known for many, many years. How many know that you can know something and really not know it? And I'll give you a perfect example. Solomon had a divine download of the wisdom of God. And he taught the wisdom of God. People came from around the world to sit at his feet. And he did exercise some of the wisdom. And the queen of, I can't remember right now, she came and said, everything my servants told me doesn't come near to what you really are. But did you ever notice as he got older in his life, he did not do what he taught? Now, I wish I could tell you everything I've ever taught, I'm a doer of it. But I'd be absolutely deceived. I'd be a liar, because I know there's areas where I'm struggling. Pastor, where do you struggle? I struggle where I'm still dealing with doubt and unbelief. So really the best thing we could do is to develop our faith in God. Faith grows. He said it's like a mustard seed. It's got to grow. And it says, now the just shall live by faith, but if any man draw back, my soul shall have no pleasure in him. Now, I could go into a series, because we're going to notice that, and jump down there, keep your finger here. Look here in Hebrews 11. And I want you to look down here. But he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. And it says here in verse 6, but without faith it is impossible to please God. So notice in chapter 10, verse 38, he's talking about pleasing God. Now really, you know, a little boy that has a good relationship with his daddy, I don't know about girls, but little boys, if he's got a daddy, and even if it's not a good daddy, there's something in the hearts of a little boy, they want to make their daddy proud. I did. I wanted to make my daddy proud. I don't think I ever did, my natural earthly daddy. But when it comes to our Heavenly Father, there should be a desire within us to make him happy or to please him. And we know that the Father was pleased with Jesus. You know why? Because Jesus lived 100% faith. And that's where things begin to happen. How many know in the realm of faith, and I can prove it to you in Hebrews 11, when you hit that, I call it a sweet spot of trusting God, Remember, it says, trust in the Lord with all thine heart. Lean not unto thy own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. You know, what really, really pleases God, and that's what Abraham became the father of faith, because it says, who against hope believed in hope, to become the father of many nations. He considered not his own body now dead, nor yet the deadness of Sarah's womb. That's what faith does. Faith doesn't look at the natural. It doesn't deny the natural, but it doesn't let the natural determine the outcome. You know, David saw Goliath. He didn't deny that Goliath existed, but faith says, but that ain't nothing compared to my God. Well, I see Goliath, and I know you are telling me he was a mighty man since he was a kid. He's a killing machine, but my God is so much bigger than that guy, it's not even worth talking about. That's what faith does. Faith says, yeah, I will. See, faith doesn't deny the problem. It just says, God is so much bigger than the problem, I can laugh at it. Yeah, y'all know, can you laugh at the problem? See, in your heart, not in your mind, but when faith is operating, you'll laugh at the problem. You'll laugh at it. And the stronger your faith, the louder your laugh. Does that make sense to you? The stronger your faith, the louder your laugh. Now, you can be weak in faith, because I've been many times where I was really weak in faith because I'm vacillating, and my laugh sounded more like a cry or a moan. But praise God, use whatever you got, right? You just, whatever you have, you got to use it. And it says here, and God's able to multiply it. That's the good news. Now, the just shall live by faith, but if any man draw back from what? Faith, my soul shall have no pleasure in him. And then in verse 39, Paul makes a confession of faith. Say confession of faith. So he's talking to these people he's written to, but we are not them. Say, I'm not one of them. We are not them who draw back unto perdition, but of them that believe to the saving of the soul. So what I want to just throw in here just for a moment, I just wrote a book yesterday. I published it, and it's called Am I Really Truly Saved? And it talks about the transformation of the human soul. Receive with meekness and grab the word which is able to save your soul. Now, don't misunderstand me. The thief on the cross, he was saved. The prodigal son, when he came to himself, and he repented in his heart, he was saved, and he headed home. The thing is, we got to be like that prodigal son. We got to just keep on heading home. All of our life. We can't, and you and I have known people who began to head home, and the next thing, they're right back out in the world. The next thing, they're just like they used to be. The next thing, they don't want to talk about God. They don't want to talk about Jesus. They don't want to talk about the Bible. And them are those who've gone back onto perdition. Now, there's a doctrine that is really damnable, and it's a twisting of the subject of grace, and it's lascivious grace, and they teach you that once you pray to prayer, no matter how you live, even if you died in sin, I'm saying without repenting, that you're okay. And there are so many scriptures that tell us otherwise. I'm going to believe what the Bible says. It says, work out your own salvation with what? Fear and trembling. Why? For it is God that worketh in you both to will and to do of his good pleasure. So I'm not really going to get very much further tonight, because when we get to chapter 12 and we get down to the first 5 verses, you can actually divide that up into 14 major subjects in just 5 verses. And I'll just read that to you in a minute. But we are not of them who draw back unto perdition, but of them believe saving of the soul. And then he says, now faith. So I want you to know it's really faith versus unbelief. Because every sin, and what is sin? That which is against the will, the nature, the character of God, that which does not agree with God, that's what sin is coming out of unbelief. It comes out of unbelief. Adam and Eve had no unbelief before they ate from the fruit. But when they ate from the fruit, a seed of unbelief and doubt got into their heart. That's when it came. and it took them over. It literally took them over. And that seed, just like faith, can grow and mature. Now, as faith grows and matures in a person's heart, how you can tell is by their fruits you'll know them. Now, I would say the fruits are the characteristics of God: love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there's no law, which all of them in operation is what we call holiness. But what you need to see is that can grow. You can grow in love. You can grow in grace. You can grow your patience. How many know you can have a little bit of patience, or you can have a whole heap amount of patience? You can be a little bit kind, or you can be really kind. You can be gentle, and you can really be gentle. You can be nice, and you can really be nice if you're walking in the fullness of God. Your faith takes a hold of the character of God. That's what faith is for, because we lost the image of God when man committed sin. So faith takes a hold of that, and you can become, I do know that when it comes to my wife, and you know what, it's easy for me, for some reason, to be nice and be kind and be gentle and be easygoing when it comes to people in general. Now, some people are the opposite, you know, but I don't know why, but since I've been saved, it's hard to push me over the ledge to where I get angry. It really is. But not when it comes to my wife and my kids. I mean, they can kind of push me over the edge pretty fast, but not as fast as they used to. Now, the other day, my wife and I were driving down the road. I'll confess her sin, and I'll confess mine. And she was on her speakerphone and was hooked up to the car talking to a company about our PA equipment. And I, without thinking, I looked at a button on the dashboard, and I should have known it was a phone with lit up with red. And I thought, well, I just want to mute this guy because I can't think. So I pushed the button, and I hung her up. Now, she had been on the phone for a long time trying to get information from this guy. Now she got disconnected, and she did. She got disconnected from God for a moment, and she yelled at me. Well, I wish I could tell you I stayed operating in the character of God. See, faith says, I just apologize, say, baby, I was wrong, I'm sorry. But you know what I did? Faith keeps you out of the flesh. I got in the flesh. And before you know it, and it's been a long time since we did that, we're driving down the road, and I started yelling at her, and she started yelling at me, and I'm yelling at her, and she's yelling at me for about maybe 2 minutes. And if you'd have been in the back seat, you would have said, man, these people need to get saved. But see, it takes faith to take a hold. And you know what faith did? Faith took me right back into the will of God. I said, baby. And then through the rest of that day, you know, I said, and I didn't say, you yelled at me first. No, I said, baby, I'm sorry. I should not have yelled at you. I hung you up. I should not have hung you up. And now, I wasn't doing that because I was afraid that she wouldn't forgive me, or that she wouldn't communicate with me, or something along that line. I did it because it was God at work inside of me. God brings us to a place of repentance, doesn't he? Y'all getting something here tonight? Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for. And what is the hope we're talking about? Remember, here's the context, and I'm going to read that to you. Look there in chapter 12. And I want you to jump down here in verse 2, chapter 12. Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the what? The joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the heavenly Father. Consider him who endured such contradictions of sinners against himself, lest you become wearied and, notice, faint in your what? In your minds. Notice where the battle is. It's where? I know it's in our physical body too, but it's right here, ain't it? Here's the battleground. It says that we're supposed to cast down every thought and every imagination that exalts itself above the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought. Well, we should say every stinking thought. into captivity of Christ, right? Under the authority of Christ. But for the hope that was set in front of him, for the joy, he's talking about this hope. So as I read this man's book and then I had took it and had it rewritten, I thought, man, we're really missing this in the body of Christ. We don't, the early church used to say, Maranatha. How many of you know what Maranatha means? He's coming soon. When's the last time you heard somebody say Maranatha? Well, you just heard me say it. But it's been a long time, isn't it? People just don't say it. That's how they used to greet one another. Maranatha. Now we say, bless you. But biblically, we ought to say Maranatha. And that means the Lord is coming soon. But Pastor Mike, it's 2,000 years. Well, what does that mean? It means he's closer now than ever. It means when you go, and not only that is he closer, but you're closer now than ever. Every day you go to bed and you get back up, you're closer than what you were the day before. And compared to eternity, in my one book about when God took me to heaven and he let me go to hell, I wrote about what eternity is like. I said eternity is like a dove that comes and grabs a grain of sand and takes it 100 million miles through his natural ability to the sun, drops the grain of sand off. That's how far the sun is from us, 93 million miles. Comes back and gets another grain of sand, and by the time that dove will have delivered every grain of sand in the world to the sun, eternity's just begun. I mean, how in the world do you comprehend this? But do we believe it? Do we believe it? It's amazing. And then Hebrews 11, it takes us through 40 major events of people who overcame, who got the victory, who fulfilled the will of God by trusting God, because that's what faith is. Faith is trusting God. We can read a little bit of this. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. See, we don't see heaven. The context is heaven. We can't see it. Whom having not seen you love, and whom though you see him not yet believing, you rejoice with joy unspeakable and full of glory. Notice, your believing produces rejoicing. That's what it says. Whom having not seen you love, whom though you see him not yet believing, you rejoice with joy unspeakable and full of glory. Now, I believe as we preach along these lines, faith will rise in your heart and joy will begin to flow. I really do. Joy will begin to come. Like I said, when I was in the world, I did a lot of things to experience joy or happiness, whether it be popping pills, drinking alcohol, smoking dope, driving my car fast, whatever else. I was looking for fulfillment, happiness, satisfaction in this world. I couldn't find it. The first time I ever really experienced joy was when I fell on my knees and I cried out to Jesus Christ. Remember, I was manic depressant. You talking about, man, I was depressed my whole life. But when I cried out to Jesus, my physical condition was still the same, but joy filled my soul. Glory came down and joy filled my soul. How many of you know that old song? When glory came down and joy filled my soul. I'm going to have to memorize it before I can sing it to you. And then you're going to have to pray for your ears. But notice, for by it the elders obtained a good report, what they were pleasing to God. Through faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the what? The Word of God. I don't understand, Pastor Mike. Why don't you? It's by the Word of God. He upholds all things by the power of his word. So that things which are seen were not made of things which do appear. There we go again. Eternity, heaven, we can't see it right now, but it's real. There is a new Jerusalem that's going to be coming down out of heaven. There is a river of life, and there are trees of life, and there are 12 gates made of single pearls. And the walls of the city are built of all types of gems, jaspers, and all kind of diamonds and rubies. Listen, by faith Abel, see, by faith. By faith Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain. He gave his best by faith. We give our best by faith. And we could keep reading this. It's powerful. It's powerful. But I want to jump down here before we close to chapter 12. So he gets done with all of these declarations of faith and how they did it all by faith. And then it's the same letter. It's not a different chapter, even though it's divided up in our handwritten Bibles. Chapter 12, verse 1. Wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses. What witnesses? The people we just read about. These people that overcame, that prevailed, that offered up their sacrifices, that Abraham offered up Isaac, and on and on and on. And Noah built the ark, and the walls of Jericho came falling down, and victory after victory. The women had their dead raised to life again, and they were delivered from the sword, and some of them chose death for a better resurrection. It says here, wherefore seeing we also come with so great a cloud of witnesses. These are people who, they made it. He's literally saying these people made it, and they're on the other side of glory, because we began talking about heaven. These are all people who have passed on. When Paul wrote this, why would he talk about, did you ever wonder why he ain't talking about Peter and James and John and Stephen and Philip? Of course, Stephen was martyred. But why? Because he was talking about those by faith who looked into eternity, and they got there. They made it. They made it. Isn't that wonderful? I'm so sorry. I'm so happy. They made it. Let us, therefore, lay aside every weight and the sin which does so easily beset us. Now, this really, if you study this in the Greek, the only way you could explain it is sins that kind of trip us up. It's almost like a ball and chain. You all know what a ball and chain is. It's they put a chain and they put a heavy steel ball on the end. It's just something that's holding you back, something that's dragging you down, something that just keeps. And really, when you come back to it, because each one of us, there's things that we struggle with. It could be with our attitudes, our outlook, our disposition. It could be hopelessness, it could be fear, it could be physical. I mean, the weight, because notice it didn't say, it says weight and the sin. Weight and the sin. So he's almost implying there's something here other than sin. And I believe it's the struggles of life. The weight and the sin would so easily beset us. So let's go back. Wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, that'd be number one. Let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily trips us up. For in other words, we've got to deal with this. What is it in my life that's preventing me from, I'm going to say, becoming more like Jesus? I think that can just, you're shooting from the hip. That's the finish line. I want to become more like Jesus, okay? So what is it? And I have, what is it, Pastor Mike? None of your business. What I mean is, we all have our own weights, and we all have our own issues, and they're all different, but really behind all of it is unbelief. Behind all of it. Now, don't beat yourself up, because you were born with it. You were born with unbelief. And so you got to fight unbelief. So how do we fight unbelief, Pastor Mike? Well, what do you think all chapter 11 is about? faith. There is no other way. Yeah, how about the renewing of your mind with the Word of God? Yeah, but that's how faith comes, by the Word of God, right? Faith comes by hearing, hear by the Word of God. It's all, in the world, you get around people who are really poverty-stricken, and they might say, man, if I only had more money. See, in their mind, the problem was lack of money. Listen, in God's eyes, your problem really is lack of faith. Now, God doesn't leave you there, because even the disciples saw that. Jesus said, all things are possible if you believe. Jesus even gave us the reality of what? He said, if you had faith the size of the grain of mustard seed, you could say unto this sycamore tree, or you could say unto this mountain, be thou uprooted, and be thou casted in the sea. And if you believe and doubt not in your heart that those things which you say will come to pass, he said this, you will have whatever you say. So, you and I may not know this, but doubt is released and unbelief is through our lips. That's how we express it. It's in there. Out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaketh. Doubt and unbelief comes out of our mouth. And you might be able to hold it in for a while, but if you don't deal with that doubt and unbelief, it's going to come out of your mouth, okay? That's why I've always told people, I'm glad I can hear what I say, because what I say and what I do reveals to me where I'm at. Because otherwise, I won't know where I'm at. But what I do and what I say reveals to me where I'm at spiritually. So now that if I know where I'm not where I need to be, I can take the proper steps to get where I need to be. Have you ever known somebody that had to go through rehab, what we call rehab? They got hurt in an accident. And Brother Pete has a tremendous story. He tore his and I can't remember, I think he tore his knee up real bad. And they basically said, you'll never be normal. And he wouldn't accept that. He wasn't a Christian yet. So he paid to go to a gym where they had those running, whatever they call them, tracks. Okay, and he would go there for 2 to 3 hours a day. He began to smoke. Well, the good news, he got born again through it, because while he's on them running tracks 2 to 3 hours, once or twice a day, very painful, he wanted to keep his mind occupied, and he as a little boy, he had memorized the Lord's Prayer, Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. And he said, after doing that for 6 months, his leg was completely restored. Not only that, but he got born again. And it was connected, because he really didn't even know what he was saying. He was just doing it hour after hour after hour after hour, running on the track, trying to keep his mind off of the pain and to keep his mind occupied. He didn't even know it, but as he was quoting it, God began to move on him. That word exploded in him. One day he found himself out in the woods behind a big shopping market, on his face, weeping and wailing and crying, and he got born again. And he was in his 50s. But so the reality of the fact is that we have got to deal with unbelief and doubt in our hearts. We've got to deal with it, because that's what's stopping me from, people really get goofy. You telling me I ain't got enough faith? What's the big deal? Just get some more. Jesus said all things are possible to those who go to church. Is that what he said? No. He didn't say that give financially. Now it takes faith to give. I understand that. But what I'm saying is all things are possible to those who believe. And so the weight and the sin which is so easily, and it goes on to say, it says here, let us lay aside every weight and sin so easily besets us, and let us what? Run with endurance the race that is set before us. We're talking about heaven, by the way. So have y'all ever seen them, like I know over in the Middle East, women wear sometimes real tight dresses all the way down to the ankles. And it's almost like they can't hardly run. And some people wear, maybe wear a heavy robe that's kind of flopping around. You can't, if you try to run with that robe, you're going to trip yourself and you're going to fall. For in other words, the Olympians, and Paul knew this, the Olympians, whether they were swimmer or racers, they would almost literally strip down to nothing but almost bare skin, because they didn't want anything to hinder them in the race they were running. So the mindset that Paul is saying here is you need to strip yourself of anything. It's not talking about people now, on relationships that are family, okay? But he's talking about what is stopping you, what is the weight, and what is, see, the devil, he is stupid, but he's crafty. What is he using to stop you from running the race the way you should? It's called the race of faith. Paul said that in 2 Timothy, I have kept the faith, I have finished the course, henceforth there is a crown of righteousness stored up for me and those who love God. So what is stopping us? And we'll finish here in verse 2. And how do we do this now? Because you say, Pastor Mike, it's by faith. Because look, it's about faith. Looking unto Jesus, who's what? The author and the finisher of our faith. We look unto Jesus, who's all. Now, looking unto a person ain't going to do the job. Looking at yourself ain't going to do the job. Where do you look? I've got to look at Jesus. How did Peter walk on the water? Absolutely impossible. Scientifically unexplainable. In the midst of the storm, in the middle of the night, strong winds. He jumps out of the boat and he walks on the water. He did what is said here. He looked unto Jesus, the author and finisher of their faith. And what is it that Jesus said to Peter when he began to sink? Oh, you of what? Little faith. That's how we do it, people. I think that's why the devil hates the message of faith so much. And when I say faith, I'm talking about trusting, dependence, reliance, confidence in God. Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him, you could say the hope, the joy that came from him be going back to the Father once again, where he always had been forever. He left the glory of heaven. He left the splendor of his Father, the oneness. See, now I'm not talking about the New Jerusalem. I'm not talking about streets of gold. I'm not talking about mansions. I'm not talking about a new heaven and a new earth. Oh, all those things are real. But there's something, when I read that man's book, that is so far beyond that. And I ordered some copies. I'm going to read it myself when I get it in the next couple of weeks. I just want to kind of soak myself in the reality of what it means to be with God and to be one with God forever. I'm telling you, this guy verbalized it. He communicated it in ways I never heard before. And it just made me want to go there so much. But because of the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the Heavenly Father. Consider him, lest you become wearied and faint in your minds. You have not yet resisted unto blood, striving against your flesh, striving against the devil, striving against emotions and attitudes and thoughts. I never have. Going on 49 years of walking with Jesus, I've never come close to sweat and blood. I think I've come close to losing my mind, but I've never come close to sweat and blood, striving against sin. But how do I do that? Got to get my eyes on Jesus. And they got to think about eternity. I know people get this thought, I prayed a prayer, I'm good to go, everything's hunky-dory. Even if they're lukewarm, lackadaisical, not just, just a Sunday morning Christian, I'm telling you, that ain't going to get it. We gotta have a love for God. We gotta love God. We gotta that's what we're pressing for, because the world, the flesh, and the devil is trying to stop us from being devoted and loving God with all of our hearts. And we need to think about eternity. We need to think. Now listen, I went to hell one time. When God dropped me into hell, and I asked him to, from 1975 all the way up into 2010, I really wouldn't talk about it. That's how terrifying it was. So that's why when these people said, yeah, God took me to hell, I go, wow, I went to hell in 2010. It's been 35 years, and I didn't want to, That was 2010, so that was, about 1975, 25 years, And so when Destiny Image asked me, because they asked me about my life story, and I told them some of my experiences. When I told them I went to hell, they got really excited. And they said, oh, we want you to write a book on that. I said, I'm not writing a book on it. Yeah, but we want you to write a book on it. No, I'm not writing a book on it. And they said, well, pray about it. So I did. I went and prayed, and I heard the Lord say, I want you to tell people what you went through. And when I gave them that book, I got it done. They didn't want nothing to do with it. Now I'm telling you, I thought, Lord, what is going on here? They're the ones who wanted me to. I think that when you read my encounter of going to hell, it's completely different than most people who went to hell. Because when they went to hell, which they really didn't, they were tormented by devils and demons. They were whipped. They were skinned. And something about the flesh that likes that kind of stuff. No. In hell, there are no devils tormenting people. Hell is a place of torment for devils. And it's so frightening to our flesh. My son Daniel told me he read that book. My son Daniel, he said, Dad, I got so upset, I threw it against the wall. He said, but then I realized what you said, it was true. So we got the reality of hell should be driving us into the reality of eternity in heaven. So Father, I thank you this word will not return void. I thank you that you will use it to quicken us, to speak it to us, and to do a mighty work in us in Jesus' name. Amen.